Well,
part.
when Dana was on, he was kind of like Ricky Bobby.
Yeah.
Just like some people, however's comfortable. Some people don't understand podcasts,
Right.
and it's just like I've been joking with you, like what we do in the hall,
Right. Yeah.
when we're passing each other.
Yeah.
And the one reason I wanted to have you on is like, man, I became friends with you on Facebook, and I run into people. I have an awesome conversation with them. Like, damn, I should have recorded that. And I recorded all my lectures when I was in school,
Right.
which I need to go through and start categorize. I just saved it to hard drives, and I never went back to it after I was done with the class. So I've got dozens and dozens of Krieger lectures, Bush lectures, Duncan lectures.
So it's all there. You just have to go through it.
Yeah, it's all there, and I think I'll be able to reconstruct it.
Is there volume?
Here, let me get you a little more.
Actually, I need less.
Less. How's that?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, good. Yeah. But it's got it's sorted by date.
Right.
And then so like I can look back and say, okay, 2011, that was a Tuesday. I had Enlightenment, philosophy, religion, World War II. You know, and then this is the days in the semester. Oh, I missed that day.
Right.
So I need to do that because I'll tell you, man, I've already gone back through my notes and integrated that. But my wife has notes. And we have some of the notes of the same class we took either different times or the same. And her notes are better than mine. But
Credit where credit is due.
sometimes I was telling her this the other day. I was like, sometimes we get such a small fraction of it.
Right.
And sometimes we get things wrong. Taking notes. And I've noticed that over integrating my notes in the classes I teach.
Sure.
So.
Sure. It's probably unavoidable to a certain extent,
Yeah. So you were saying you actually have more of a background in geography. I didn't know that till we were talking the other day.
I took a lot of geography at Tech. Yeah.
Dude, I want to have Swain on. I just need to email him his tech email. He doesn't have any social media or anything.
Yeah. What did I tell you? Physical, U.S. and Canada, Asia, Latin America, and I did an independent study my last semester there with him.
What'd you do on your independent study?
The cultural ecology of man-eating in sub-Saharan Africa.
Ooh. Okay, so have you seen that new Woods who told me about it? Actually, my buddy Colby told me about it first. I was like, I only watch Bob Breyer. He's my favorite Egyptologist. But there's a new Netflix documentary called Saqqara Tomb.
Haven't heard.
They've been doing this excavation at Saqqara, and they found, animal mummies are huge in Egypt.
Right. Yeah, sure.
But they found a mummified lion.
Interesting.
Yes, right. And I want to say, and I got to go back and look, and the guy that I follow, he's got a great courses out, Bob Breyer. I just mentioned, I'm trying to get him on the pod. I've been emailing back and forth with him. Mm-hmm. But he has a whole couple of lectures on animal mummies.
Interesting.
On that great courses where he talks about, they also found a mummified crocodile, which is not, I've seen a mummified crocodile before.
Have you?
Yeah.
Where was this?
They found that at the Saqqara tomb as well. I've seen mummified crocodiles come up just listening to him and seeing pictures of them and studying. Seems less rare, but like they were really jumping up and down about this lion mummy.
Interesting.
Yeah. But because they didn't know what it was. They're like, is this some species? Like, then they got some imaging of it, and we're looking at the teeth. And also the wrap is like somebody took a Sharpie. I mean, it wasn't a Sharpie back then. And drew on it. Like it had like maybe a beetle or something here on its head, had like a little mustache looking.
And nowadays, I mean, you wouldn't find a lion anywhere near North Africa. Yeah. I mean. That,
something else I was researching. This would have been Old Kingdom, right? Mm-hmm. So even in the Old Kingdom, they were importing stuff like that, but they were also importing pygmies and dwarfs. And they were seen at that time as magical, but by the New Kingdom, they're like, we hate dwarfs. The king issued this proclamation, Pharaoh. It was like, stop picking on the dwarfs. Like, it's like, stop punishing them. Stop doing this. It's like they're treating them like house elves or something.
Wow. Yikes.
Yeah.
There was a an Asian lion subspecies in India. A lot of people aren't aware of that, but last I had heard when I wrote that paper several years ago, there was one very small enclave of those left. You know, I mean, of course, you have tigers and leopards in India that are more well known. There was an Asian lion that's almost all but extinct by this point. Much like the lions in North Africa and the war elephants. Talking about Rome and ancient Carthage.
Yeah.
That was a distinct subspecies from the forest elephant or the African bush elephant that was native to North Africa. That's no longer there.
We were talking about Antiochus the other day, were we not?
Antiochus. We were.
Yeah.
The third.
Antiochus III. He used war elephants against Ptolemy the Fourth.
Yeah.
At the Battle of Raphia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he may have used them against the Romans at, I don't know if he had them at Magnesia, when Scipio's little brother, Lucius, Scipio Asiaticus, later on, went over and pushed Antiochus around for a while.
See, this is how it all began, man. Like, one day you heard me lecturing about Scipio, and we started talking in the hall. I've told a couple of people, so I'm like, dude, Justin knows way more than me.
Well,
I'm like the history teacher around here.
Nerds tend to find each other.
Yeah. But it was nice. I was like, yeah, and we had a conversation, and we've had about a dozen history conversations since. And
True story.
have you ever thought about getting your master's and teaching some classes or anything like that?
I don't know that I have the patience or the temperament, quite frankly. I don't know that I am the instructor type.
Yeah. It is, it's challenging because it's different. Like, I enjoy way more, like, conversations like this.
Yeah.
It is, Ray and I were talking about this the other day. Some people are good instructors, and they're only good online. Because
without that interaction, that's, yeah.
Yeah, and I have to, the other day I was emailing a student, and I was like, I'd gone back and forth with them 4 or 5 times about some miscommunication they had. And it's like, really, they just hadn't come to class a couple of times. And we're trying to get everything sorted out that they'd missed. And I was like, well, I saw you post this. I was like, that's a makeup for some other student. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. And then I had to send them, I was like, if any of that came across as rude, I didn't mean for it to, like, because I was like, that doesn't concern you. I was like, they could read that funny.
Yeah.
But it's just like some professors would not even think about, like, did they perceive that oddly?
Wouldn't give it a second thought. Yeah.
And I've had just a couple instances about teaching, like, they're like little emotional children sometimes. Like they especially the concurrent students and freshmen, they'll get their feelings hurt and go talk to the boss or something.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I don't know. I tend to worry about things in the past like that I've said, and worry about how it was taken, but I'm working on not worrying about it. And just letting it roll and being who I am.
Yeah. So, tell me a little bit about your background, dude. Everybody, were you working there when I started? I've been there 3 years.
I was originally there in January of 2016.
Okay.
And then stayed about half that year and then left and did other things, and then came back in March of 17. I got out and I went into real estate for a while, and then came back March of 17 and have been there since then.
Okay.
So I'm not sure when exactly you started.
Around the same time.
Okay.
I was probably, as a matter of fact, I think I was adjuncting spring of 17.
Thinking about it, I think I was there and remember you arriving.
Possibly, yeah.
No, wait, I know I was there because I remember when Battershell retired.
Yeah,
so,
I did. I was the semester before he retired.
Yeah.
I adjuncted. He retired, and then they
moved,
told me about it, and I applied. And, I'm saying, like, luckily Flowers did not. He applied and then withdrew.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of nervous about that because, he has a PhD, even though it's not in history. He'd worked there for years. Is really not that. He's not that old. He's in his 50s.
Sure.
I don't think he's quite 60. So I was like, oh, man, I wonder how they're going to do this. And I was kind of sweating. But then he never interviewed.
That's the thing, with a teaching position. You've got to have a slot to go into.
Yeah.
And people tend to park there and stay.
It. What blows my mind? I've had four historians from U of A on that are either almost done with their PhD, or are just got it.
Okay.
And man, they go forever. And they end up doing all the work. They're teaching all the classes I want to teach.
Right.
And not getting paid anything.
Right.
I mean, they're not teaching graduate courses. But like a friend of mine, Marie, she teaches like 4,000 level women's history and stuff I'll never get to teach, really, unless I get a full-time spot.
Yeah.
Not a community college.
Right.
But she makes, and let's just say she makes $20,000 a year.
Okay.
But she teaches as many classes as me. No benefits. And like, that's something that's really been bothering me about higher education is adjuncting and making these candidates at PhD or master students, less so master students, really do the lion's share of the labor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, man. I mean, it'd be cool to go to PhD school, but man, these people are in for like 7.5 years. You're
in for the long haul, yeah, when you get into that for sure. I don't know. I don't think I have the patience or the tolerance to, especially now. I mean, I'll be 40 next month.
Hey, man.
So
you don't look it. You look healthy.
Well, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Especially, I got carded yesterday at a restaurant, and at this point, it's flattering.
Yeah.
You know?
I get carded periodically, and I'm like, thanks.
Yeah.
I'm only 33, though.
Appreciate that at this point, though.
The other day, I went at a committee meeting, and Ron, who we were talking about Sango, he's like, "What's up, boy?" And I was like, dude, I was like, how much do you like and know about Jesus or Alexander the Great? And he's like, well, yeah, they're two famous people that have done all these things. I was like, same age as me. Maybe we don't call me boy anymore.
That's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hopefully you make it past 33, unlike those guys.
That was the next joke I made.
Yeah.
That Bob Breyer guy was mentioning, there's a documentary on YouTube he did. It used to be on Discovery or something, but it's on YouTube called The Three Kings.
Okay.
Where he breaks down the three magi, kings, wise men from the Jesus story.
Yeah.
And he goes into a miscalculation by a historian that was copied many times over about the dating on the birth of Jesus that I'd never heard. He was talking about how the original historian who authored some of that many people cited did not count Octavian's time that he ruled before he was declared Caesar.
Gotcha.
And it offset it. And then he also didn't count year zero.
So from the time, basically, that he defeated Antony and, got his hands around the whole thing, to when he actually became Caesar and emperor. And
I think it was 4 years later or something like that.
Yeah, I don't recall off the top of my head. But there was a gap there.
20, yeah. So, and then there was the guy, he explained it this way. He's like, so you got 1999, 2000, 2001. Mm-hmm. And he's like, that historian did not count year zero. He didn't count. We didn't count 2000. But he had this alternate sort of theory on the dating of the birth of Christ that I'd never come across. And maybe everybody's changed it since then. I'm about to start teaching Christianity. We just started Roman Kingdom.
Okay.
So
yeah, nice.
Which I love that time period. I love reading into Livy and Plutarch and.
The thing with the kingdom that gets frustrating for me is you can't tell how much history is underlying myth. How much Romulus and Remus were actual historical figures and how much of that is just mythical overlay. And it gets, I don't know, it gets fuzzy there, and that's frustrating because I want to know these things.
Me too.
That's the struggle for me with the study of ancient history, and Rome in particular, is there are so many things we don't know and that we will never know.
It's like, hey, when did you guys get started? 1 year before Greece?
Yeah. Convenient. Yeah.
I think that was Livy that set that dating, but he was writing under Augustus.
Yeah.
Right. Years later.
Yeah.
So.
Quite a while after it actually happened. It's like, have you read Polybius's Histories?
I've not read the entire work, but I've read in relation to.
I've sampled it, and I mean to plow through the whole thing, but it's on my to-do list.
I've sampled it, and I've, man, there's so many good podcasts out there these days. Even Audible. I don't know if you'd use Audible for audiobooks, but they even started picking up podcasts. I was on the phone with them yesterday, like, we need to recommend this history podcast. You see what you're listening to, and I was like, hey, whoa. Yeah, recommend it, put it on my list or whatever, because they do that every time I call them. And I call and return books periodically.
Right.
But they're like, I was like, how does a man get a podcast on Audible? I was like, the reason I listen to Audible is because I heard about you on a podcast. One of my favorite historians you sponsor his podcast.
Right.
So, Yeah, it's interesting. But podcasts are taking over, and there's one I follow that does Rome quite intensely. I plan on doing a intense Egypt podcast.
It's a good idea.
Egypt Unraveled.
Yeah, yeah. So, any particular period or the whole?
I want to do the whole thing. I want to do. I want to do a big one all the way to the Old Kingdom. So I want to do pre-dynastic, prehistory, pre-dynastic Egypt,
Right.
the Narmer palette, and also get into some other sort of side quests with like mythology and religion, get the Osiris myth and everything out. So I think I can do about a 3-hour episode over all that. It'd probably normally be like 4 lectures.
Interesting.
And then I want to do another big one over Napoleon.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
I've been down a big rabbit hole. Been pulling from my French Revolution book from when I took that course with Krieger, all my notes I ever had. I had that guy for so many courses where he went into Napoleon. Civ, French Revolution era Napoleon, seminar in ancient Egypt. So like I've been kind of pulling and comparing and contrasting, looking at all my sources I had with that. And then this Bob Breyer guy, man, he goes into... See, Krieger, and he never mentions this, Krieger called the scientist, and the soldiers called him this, Napoleon's donkeys. So I want to do a big lecture on Denon and all of the savants
Gotcha.
that went.
Right.
To me, the savants of that expedition are like talking about the philosophers of the Enlightenment. Like it's amazing. So I'll tell you, off on this whole tangent of research, you ever got into the Master and Commander series?
I have not.
I've never read the books, but I rewatched the Russell Crowe movie the other day, and it's fantastic.
It is pretty good. It's very watchable. You know, even though it's lengthy, it's very well done.
So he's like Russell Crowe's character. They're like, "Yeah, what? You round Lord Nelson? What? Tell us about it." And he's like, "Yeah, he spoke to me twice. I fought with him at the Battle of the Nile." And I'm like, "Wow!" So then that got me even more interested. But man, that movie's about. There's apparently like half a dozen books.
Interesting.
And that's just
I
one
wasn't
of
aware.
them. Yeah, I wasn't either. I was like, "This is a book. I'm gonna look into it." And all the books are like 16 to 20 hours long.
Wow.
Like, I just completed the first Harry Potter book on audio, and that was only 8.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty thick book.
Right.
So it's, but man, that's such fascinating history, the naval warfare between France and Great Britain.
Yeah. I have to confess, most of my knowledge of French military history comes from the end of the colonial period, like Indochina, Algeria. You know, I'm not as big on...
I would like to know more about that, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, like, pretty much I start with Vietnam and don't get a lot of pre-contextual stuff.
So have you read Falls, Street Without Joy?
It's on my list. You're the one who referred that to me.
That's right. We had yeah.
This is again why you had to come be on the podcast.
Fall was a very bright guy who kind of foresaw where things were going to go if changes weren't made. And he died fairly early on. He was KIA, fairly early in the conflict, but he pretty much nailed the situation as it was likely to proceed as he saw it.
Man, you know what I'm fascinated by? So The Quiet American by Graham Greene.
Yeah.
Fascinating book. It's not, it's like, well, do I take this seriously or is this fiction? It's technically a fiction. But
a lot of things are technically fiction, but
Dispatches, did you ever read that by Hare?
I've not read Dispatches.
Oh, man, it's good. As a matter of fact, I think I have a copy of it here, and you would be welcome to borrow it. I got the audiobook, so I doubt I pick up the physical. And if we forget, I'll try and think and bring it to you. But that was a Duncan book. Dr. Duncan. She assigned that. And too, I'll say, you've been around Michael Booty very much?
I don't know him.
Man, he and you, surprisingly, he's an English guy, but have recommended some of the same books to me.
Have we?
Like he brought up the Street Without Joy, but also one called Dispatches he brought up. But he's got recommended me another one called The Things They Carried, which I think is a Vietnam era.
Okay.
And it's about things that soldiers carried with them.
Just like on their...
Put on their helmets.
Personage.
Whatever. Yeah. And that's an interesting thesis point. So I see that that comes up in like every Vietnam book I've listened to and read. It comes up in Dispatches. They talk about this guy had a spade or a joker he'd carry with him. Or
my dad's armored unit, their logo emblem on the side of the tanks was a black ace of spades. mostly because the Vietnamese were superstitious about it being associated with death.
Okay.
So, and I've got a pack of their death cards with the says C Company, 2nd, 34th Armor, and it's got the black ace of spades on it that you go around and leave on bodies to basically freak out the NVA after the fact.
That stuff's very interesting to me. It's how these soldiers were, and Dispatches is all like he makes up all the soldiers in it, but they're composites of people he served with.
Right. Sure.
He mentions Errol Flynn's
Sean
son. Yeah,
Sean Flynn
in that book mentions him dying.
I don't know. Did they ever find Sean Flynn?
I don't know. I don't.
He went into Cambodia, right?
Yeah.
And the Khmer Rouge got him. Isn't that?
I believe that's what happened.
Sean Flynn?
I looked that up when I was listening to Dispatches because it came up. And I mean, I think you probably saw the old school Errol Flynn, Robin Hood.
Oh, yeah.
When you were young. Dude, I grew up on that movie. Him eating the mutton at the.
Errol Flynn was nuts, man. In real life, Errol Flynn was. Yeah.
Wild dude. I'm trying to think of what other movies he was in that are classic like that.
Oh, Captain Blood.
Okay,
yeah, he did. Toward the end there, I think the last one he did was this movie with Trevor Howard called The Roots of Heaven, where they're like trying to stop ivory poachers in East Africa. And at that point, Flynn was pretty much washed up. He was about 50 and looked like he was, approaching 80, and
fast and hard.
Had lived hard, and it showed.
Yeah.
And then he did some movie down in Cuba with there was a pro Castro thing called Cuban Rebel Girls.
I'll look into that.
Back when the revolution, because Flynn died in '59, I think. So yeah, the revolution had just concluded or was about to conclude, and Castro really hadn't turned toward the Marxism fully yet. So I mean, he had a certain degree of support in certain quarters. People like Flynn, Hemingway, Yeah, I mean, it's not much of a film, but it's interesting for Errol Flynn.
See, we've done some podcasts like this. I got a buddy named Thurman who's a film connoisseur, and also he just got his master's in history somewhat recently. Wrote a thesis, and he did an episode on the podcast over it, where his thesis was about the narrative of the Kennedy assassination. His argument was that this changing narrative and all of this, this gets inserted here, this gets inserted here, this changed public opinion with that, and the Warren Commission. He goes into the whole body of the scholarship, and he goes, and now we have the deep state.
Okay.
Right? Like, he basically talks about it eroding and undermining public opinion, and basically the process of like figuring things out. And
I think the lack of transparency on the government's part has contributed and done more harm to that situation than just telling the truth, whatever the actual truth and the people behind it may be.
Well, and two, it's like the lack of transparency that comes around. Like, so many common people know now about Northwoods or Paperclip or which and then those people that already are conspiratorial take it to a whole other level. And
then it just completely goes off the rails from there. Yeah.
Man, I will say, back on this guy, one person kind of got me to stop being conspiratorial about shit with several conversations. But that'd be Jeff Woods. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, he just has a way of looking at it. And two, he lays it out this way every time, too. He's like, that book you read, that guy you listened to, made money off of you. And I think that's why he wrote it. Because I remember one time I messaged him about, who was that guy that he's been around since the Nixon, Roger Stone. Is it Stone? Roger. He was around with Trump. They did a documentary about him.
Talking about the filmmaker?
Yeah. No, not Oliver Stone.
Okay.
This guy was, I want to say he's even in jail right now, that he got arrested and is serving a brief. But this guy has been harassing the system since the Nixon days. And he wrote a book, and the thesis was basically like LBJ killed Kennedy. And I'm like, I got onto this somehow because I was doing all this research about 1968, and this podcast came up with him on. And I was like, oh, man, I believe all this. And the next thing you know, I might text him, Jeff Woods, like, dude, Did you know about this guy who knew this guy who knew LBJ's lawyer who knew this guy?
I think I figured it out.
Yeah, dude, it was that. And he was like, well, let's talk about that guy.
Yeah.
And, you know.
About that guy, Brian.
Well, then, too, again, with I read that Manson book, Chaos, by, I can't remember the author. I didn't think it was good. Joe Rogan was raving about it. Like, oh, it's the best book ever. But it did have some good content in it, in that he brought out that Manson was basically going to this clinic called, I believe it's the Haight-Ashbury.
Okay.
Where they were basically doing drug experiments on hippies, giving them drugs. So I didn't know about that, but then this guy gets you lured in for like 11 chapters, and then he's like, it was all the CIA, it was all them, but he doesn't really offer any proof.
Yeah.
And then Woods always gives me another, he's like, read this book.
Yeah.
Search for the Manchurian Candidate, or,
Right.
you know, and then it goes way more in, but I've always been kind of fascinated by how involved the government is with scheduling the illegality of drugs while also using them on people.
I read an article the other day about the CIA's program back in the 50s where they were dosing people without their knowledge or consent.
LSD?
Yeah. What was the name of that program? They finally came clean about it.
Oh, man, I should know this. I just read a book on it that Search for the Manchurian Candidate.
One guy who worked in the biowarfare labs wound up killing himself because he didn't know what was happening to him. And he just snapped. And turns out his superior was dosing him on the sly. And this guy thought he was losing his mind. He didn't know what was going on. And, yeah, he jumped.
Several agents that were just going to be like around the office, not doing anything that day, would dose at work.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember the name of the program.
Let's Google it. That's like I was saying before we got started, I'm trying to get everything networked in here so I could Google stuff and throw it up on that TV.
Gotcha.
And I'm embarrassed that I don't know this, but CIA drugs. Let's see what we got. Got a Wikipedia article, involvement in Contra cocaine trafficking, Contra's gangs and crack. That's peer-reviewed. Institute of Policy Studies. NSA archive, Contra's cocaine. There's a lot on here about cocaine. Let me type in CIA LSD experiments program. MK Ultra?
That's the one.
Yep. Dude, I'm so embarrassed. If Jeff Woods is listening to this, I feel like I've failed. Because that is a big part of the spies and espionage class he teaches.
Is it?
Yeah. So, man, I didn't know this, but I was hitting him up about this. The Spartans had a spy agency called the Cryptia.
Really?
And if you went from 18 to 20, you were a spy. Right? That's what you did. When you became an equal at 18, the first 2 years you would spy on the helots and everyday Spartan citizens.
Yeah, it's funny. That's one thing. I mean, we talk a lot about Scipio. It's one thing that Scipio was one of the first Roman commanders to utilize was intelligence gathering and reconnaissance.
Yeah.
You know, basically starting in Spain, you know, against the Carthaginians and the Celts and all that sort of thing. And, you know, I mean, you in ancient times, you know, you think about reconnaissance and intelligence gathering, that sort of thing, as being a modern contemporary thing. But, I mean, those guys way back there started doing it fairly early on.
Darius the Great did it. With he added 3 departments, Office of the Secretary, Army General's position, where they would rotate into the 20 districts. He had 20 districts in the empire. And there is King's Eyes and Ears, is what it was called. The King's, and it was a subset of one of these 3 departments that he introduced this new way of organizing the empire. These three different departments, rotating officials in the 20 provinces. But
right.
King's Eyes and Ears, the Cryptia. What was the one you mentioned? Scipio.
Yeah.
I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, and you know, it was the Roman command system back then was baffling because you had all volunteer armies at that point. This was before the Marian reforms. So you did not have a professional standing army. Basically, they were all, you know, people who were called up to serve. not really National Guardsmen, but sort of the ancient Roman equivalent, you know.
Yeah.
And then they deployed, and then you had 2 commanders assigned most of the time who would alternate command every day. So, like, one day, you know, you'd have commander number 1 in charge of the army, and then the next day you'd have the other guy, and then day 3 it would be the first guy again, which strikes me as a nightmare of command and control and logistics.
You know, with back on Sparta, I was saying, I never knew this until I got into teaching, but they were 2 king systems. So, like, you hear Leonidas die, and you're like, oh my God, they don't have a king. What are they going to do? That's what I was thinking but no, they had the kings had different roles. One was a more like, I'm the king in the city, and the other guy was always in the field with the army. Right?
Gotcha.
It's based off how I understand it. I hope, and that's how I teach it.
So you've got an administrator, and you've got a battlefield commander. Yeah. It's like the Romans had 2 consuls, you know.
Yeah.
They had a co-consulship, you know, going on throughout the Republic until, you know, Caesar basically came along,
It's always fascinating to me. I've tried, and I've read and heard historians talk about this, but like how Caesar Augustus is able to leverage what Octavian, what Julius Caesar could not.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially he does the same thing.
Right.
Tactfully, but doesn't get assassinated for it.
Yeah, he was very... It's interesting to look back and see how Octavian kind of outmaneuvered everybody else and wound up as the guy at the top at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You know?
Mark Antony being one of those.
I think Antony, you know, as a commander and a soldier was far more ferocious, but he was just simply outmaneuvered.
You know, I need to look way deeper into Antony than I have on the surface level, because I was reading my Krieger notes the other day, and he said this in the notes: greatest general Rome ever had, or something to that equivalent. And I was like, this would have been, you know, he would have, I guess, been referring to that time,
right?
But you know, I don't know if that's a quantifiable statement. But man, the way he was talking about him, and the way I wrote it down, and I remember at the time I was like, who is this dude?
Yeah, you know, honestly, and that's one reason I believe Scipio was the best all time, because Scipio defeated Hannibal, all right, and the Carthaginians. I mean, later on, and he did it with a non-professional, non-standing army. You know, later on, you had commanders like Caesar, Pompey, Antony. Those guys came along after the Marian reforms. They had a standing professional army, and they were facing barbarians in Germania, Gaul, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, Hannibal and the organized Carthaginian forces and their mercenaries were first rate by anybody's standards. And Rome, I mean, he was an existential threat, you know, to the Republic. I mean, he was literally outside the gates of Rome, just wreaking havoc up and down the Italian peninsula. And they really didn't get a handle on him until Scipio, you know, basically just kind of forced himself in the situation. And he knew that by attacking Carthage's holdings in Spain and not attacking Hannibal in Italy itself would draw him away. And then he had to push the war to Africa to get Hannibal off the Italian peninsula. You know, otherwise, because they were chasing Hannibal around Italy for, seemed endless, you know, that you had to threaten his homeland to get him to come back home. And anyway, yeah, the point of all that is Rome never faced a commander or an enemy force of that caliber again. Mm-hmm. And, you know, Scipio was undefeated. I mean, throughout the whole thing.
Yeah. What was the... I'm a little fuzzy on, I know we talked about this before, but that depot at Cannae, what all went down there? They killed Romans till like it was going out of style.
And that was, Scipio was a junior officer at Cannae. I'm thinking it was his father and uncle in command.
Yeah.
You had, you know, Publius the elder, and then you had his uncle Gnaeus, who were, I think, part of that organization at Cannae. They were later killed in Spain before Scipio took over, but... yeah, Hannibal, it was just wholesale slaughter. He purely outmaneuvered and outgeneraled the Romans.
They, reading the accounts of that battle, the Carthaginians basically got tired of swinging their swords.
You just get tired of killing people after a while.
They're like, we're going to take you as a prisoner. We're tired of killing you. But, yeah, that's just a why. Every time I get to that part of the story, I'm like,
right.
They invaded and then did that. And then the Romans still came back, because I want to say like 50,000 people or something died at Cannae, or Romans, if I'm not.
Yeah, casualties were massive.
Yeah.
And then you had the the Spanish campaign, and then going down to Africa, and eventually culminated at Zama. But that was the thing. I mean, the Barkid brothers, Hannibal and his two brothers, and then eventually their father Hanno. Before that, it's odd how the Carthaginian forces were by and large commanded by one family. And a few other generals who were not blood relations to him. But,
Hamilcar, Hannibal, and there was another one.
Hasdrubal?
Yeah.
There were two Hasdrubal. There was Barca and then Gisco, who was not a relative, but...
Yeah. Man, let's see. Carthaginian forces gained foothold in southern Italy after this. Strength. Carthaginians had 86,400 men, 80,000 infantry, and 6,400 cavalry.
Right.
Casualties, let's see. Livy says casualties and losses, 67,500, 48,200 killed, 19,300 captured, 14,000 escaped. Polybius says 5,700 killed to 48,000.
I tend to rely more on Polybius because Polybius, he was very close to Scipio's family, and timeline-wise, he was much closer to the events that happened than Livy. Polybius came first. He knew Scipio's widow, his son, his adopted grandson, who became Scipio Africanus Minor, who finally destroyed Carthage in the Third Punic War. Knew him directly, so, I Livy, coming along later, I think Polybius is the more reliable of the two.
See, this is why you should be a historian, dude. Okay, so there's history buffs, right?
Right.
And most of the time, they annoy the shit out of me, especially when we start talking about the Civil War.
Right.
But, history buffs of the American Civil War are kind of hard to deal with, in my experience. But I do run into history buffs, and they never have this sort of conversation. It's not just like, I'm a history nerd. They don't know who Livy and Polybius are. They don't know the primary sources. They might have seen some documentaries, tell you some great details, maybe read a book.
So who do you think the finest tactical commander was in the Civil War? You got an opinion?
Oh, man. What do you got? If you don't,
I think it was Forrest.
Forrest. Okay.
At a tactical level, as understanding movement and operations and development and that sort of thing. That's
Yeah. I don't even know if I have an opinion on that. I should.
I think the ones you hear about. You had several people in the Confederacy that were promoted beyond their ability. In my opinion, Bragg, Hood. Those guys were very fine officers at, lower echelons. And they got up to the top levels and were commanding armies and that sort of thing. They kind of got out of their depth, in my opinion.
Yeah. All the commanders I talk about, I'm not overly impressed by. You know what I'm saying? Like when I go through the Civil War in class, even in Arkansas, I go pretty deep in Arkansas, and I'm like, you guys need to get your shit together.
Yeah.
McCulloch and Price arguing all the time. Hindman gets assassinated, turns it into a total war, martial law.
Right.
Gets assassinated during Reconstruction.
Right.
Granny Theophilus Holmes storms Helena, just sacrifices his people. So, too, it's interesting that, Bragg, that they name a fort after a Confederate commander.
And he was, at the lower levels in the, what was the earlier conflict a lot of them were in? The Mexican-American War? Yeah. Bragg distinguished himself at a lower level of command. A lot of those guys did.
Yeah, even in Arkansas.
And then after secession, those guys were senior to a lot of them, so they got the top jobs, and they are classic examples of being promoted beyond your abilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a little bit of a theme, it seems like, in our history. War 1812 is the same thing. I mentioned we're about to start the Mexican-American War, but you either had no experience, you'd never led, and you're invading Canada.
Right.
War 1812. Or you're way past your prime, and you got no business being in there.
And that was the thing that impressed me about Forrest. Whatever else Forrest may have been later on, he was the finest tactician and most able field commander, I believe, on either side of the whole thing. He came in, enlisted, with no prior experience, and became just a master cavalryman.
Yeah.
Across Mississippi and Bryce's Crossroads, especially the Battle of Bryce's Crossroads, probably his finest hour.
Okay.
But so there's some. Go do some research.
Yeah, I will. See, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, man. Yeah, you've got a ton of knowledge. Which when did you get into? Have you always enjoyed history?
Yeah, ever since I was a kid. My dad majored in history at UCA and has always been. I don't know. I grew up with that being nurtured, with history and science and all that sort of thing, and it's always been an interest, and I've always just sort of read about it independently and. Just a history nerd, basically.
You are well read too, though. I mean, that's it's always a pleasure talking with you about it. So your dad is. You told me briefly about his time in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
Where all was he stationed at?
So he was with the C Company, 2nd Battalion of the 34th Armor. He was a tank commander. They were. That battalion was attached at various times during his tour to the 101st Airborne, the 25th Infantry Division, the 5th Mechanized Infantry Division, and one more. And A, B, and D companies and headquarters company were down south. C Company, his unit was up north on the DMZ, basically as a speed bump in case the NVA decided to come over and, do their thing. C Company and the 3rd of the 5th Cav, which was a mixed Cav unit, were up there as basically the American Armored Presence and running operations up there. So he was there December of 68 to December of 69 in those uppermost provinces just below the DMZ. Went through the A Shaw Valley. Only American Armored unit that ever went into the A Shaw Valley in June of 69 during Operation Montgomery Rendezvous. And yeah, it was...
when did you say he went in 68?
Yeah, December.
What year?
December.
What a terrible time to be in, man. We've been doing a series of podcasts about 68, just as a year.
Right.
But, man, just the stuff that happened in Vietnam, and then you get into Pueblo and the stuff playing out internationally. But,
right.
Man, Tet right out the gates.
And Tet, for a lot of people, Tet was maddening because, tactically and militarily, it was a victory. The VC were broken after Tet. That was they played their last hand.
Oh, you mentioned when we were chatting before about some of your dad's take on the Cronkite.
Yeah, and I agree with that take, was that, the VC came down, they launched Tet and just got, their asses handed to them, basically, and were broken as a fighting force. And, they asked Westmoreland, that, and he said, yeah, we're defeating them all over the country. They wreaked some havoc, but at the end of the day, they lost. Yeah, Cronkite kind of took that, and I don't know if he had his own aims, but basically painted a different picture than what was happening on the ground, and that shapes public opinion.
Yeah.
Because, Westy, they straight up asked Westy, and he said, he gave them the unvarnished truth on the ground. We're winning this thing. We're breaking the VC. And they did in 68 after Tet. And Cronkite goes on TV, and suddenly the war is lost. And
it's the battle for hearts and minds.
Yeah, and that was the turning point. Which the military situation on the ground was not accurately reflected in what was conveyed to the American people, and it changed public opinion. Don't get me wrong. I think the whole thing was. I wouldn't have gotten involved in it. I don't think we should have gotten involved in it. It was a piece of real estate and a succession of, dictators in South Vietnam that weren't worth our blood and treasure, quite frankly. Yeah. But if you're going to go there and do that, do it right out of the gate and not piecemeal and, where it drags out for 15 years.
Was your dad drafted?
He volunteered.
I had an uncle that I told you passed away. It was in the 19 that died at Quang Tri, but he volunteered.
Right.
And it blew my mind. I interviewed my grandpa near the end of his life for an independent study I did with Woods.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And my grandpa said this. He's since passed away, but he said, I wanted him to go to Canada. I did not. My grandpa's at Vietnam at Utah Beach. And it blew my mind that he went through St. Lo, Battle of the Bulge, Saw Patton challenge Rommel to a tank duel, all this crazy shit. And then he's like, yeah, I didn't want that for him. I tried to get him to go to Canada, and he volunteered.
Yeah.
But, man, you hear the stories about, like, the lottery draft and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm always fascinated to hear people report how that was, waiting for your number to come up.
Right, yeah. No, Dad started college in fall of '67 and just was restless and bored, and decided he wanted to do something else. So he volunteered, and as a volunteer had a 2-year hitch instead of 3, as opposed to getting drafted. Mm-hmm. And then came back and used the GI Bill to finish his bachelor's in history at UCA. So.
I wonder if he had a more intense interest after getting out.
Yeah, I mean, he's always been of that inclination. You know, he's like me. It interests him, you know. Yeah, it just...
And that makes a lot of sense, your dad being a history guy now. In hindsight, it's like my dad was a redneck country guy, you know, from Hartman, Arkansas.
Right.
He's a great dude.
Yep.
He's super handy, can build anything.
Right.
But we never had any historical talks growing up, you know.
Yeah, my dad and my grandfather were both. I mean, they've got the intellect, you know, and then they're very, very capable and very bright and do all these things, but they're also very hands-on and capable and practical. And, yeah, I mean, I'm very fortunate to have wonderful family that, you know, brought me along over the years and kind of nurtured that in me.
Yeah.
You know?
Dude, everybody we work with wants to know about your car. We're like, this dude's car is insane. And it is.
My elderly BMW.
Yeah, I mean, all we see is a 2-seater sports car.
Yeah,
okay? Like,
yeah.
we're like, this guy, he's cool.
Well, it's 18 years old at this point.
That's like, I see the old 350Zs rolling around. They still look awesome.
Yeah.
And they were awesome, you know, 15 years ago. But now it's a 370Z. And
yeah, back in the early 70s, my dad had a 260 and a 280 Datsun Z car.
Oh, nice.
260 was gold and the 280 was blue, and sold them both and really regrets now that he didn't keep the 280, you know. And that's honestly one reason I've held on to it, because I know, you know, that car was the last Z3 that was on a lot in Arkansas. And see, they phased them out in '02 and they brought in the Z4. That was the last one they had in Little Rock, the dealership. And they said, well, you know, we can sell you that one or we can order you a new 4. And I was like, I think I want that one. And you know, I know if I sold it now, I could never get another one in that condition, and I would regret selling it.
Yeah.
So even though it cost me an arm and a leg in parts occasionally, and, you know, stocks are drying up, you know, supplies are drying up for getting replacement parts, I've just held on to it and nursed it, and it makes me happy driving it. So
yeah. Do you have any other vehicles that you
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't. So I need to, I honestly need to get something else and, you know, put that one up and drive it occasionally somewhere.
Yeah.
You know?
On dates and stuff.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
Yeah. Play that card. I need to impress somebody. Yeah.
You know, my wife and I have been trying super duper hard to have kids, which, you know, but now we're going to have to, I'm about to start driving her Subaru, which she left right before you got here. It was a Forester.
Gotcha.
And then I'm going to just probably drive the old gym car that's got the wrap rotten off of it and 220,000 miles on it. I'll probably just drive that back. It still gets 28 miles a gallon. I've replaced the motor in it.
I get 27.
Nice.
You know,
yeah.
For a big straight 6, it's not bad. But, you know, the thing about that car, it's not practical in any way. It's just fun. You know, I mean, going to Kroger is a problem occasionally. You know, when you load up the passenger seat in the trunk with your groceries. But
dude, I didn't think about that.
When, you know, with that car, practicality is not really the point of the exercise.
Yeah.
So
you got a sound system in it?
Just the one that came in there, the Harman Kardon, you know, the one that BMW put into the factory.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I enjoy it.
It is. It's one of those things that, like, people who don't talk with you like this at work, they're like, that dude, his car, have you seen it? It's just been a funny thing that's come up 3 or 4 times, like people speculating about your identity or whatever.
The enigmatic assistant registrar. Yeah.
Super funny.
Oh.
Man, so let's chat quickly about, so you did have a brain surgery. It's been how long ago now?
It's been 18 months, a little over 18 months, yeah.
Man, first time, you're the second person that has had a brain surgery operation. Had another guest came on that had a tumor removed.
Right.
And after he had the tumor removed, had all this creativity, wrote 5, 6 books.
Really?
Right? Gave me one of the books when he came on.
I wonder what type and size tumor and where it was.
I'd have to go back to the podcast so I could shoot you the link. He talks all about it, but best of my memory, it was something on the side of his head,
like in
that was
the
taken off.
temporal or parietal lobes, and
And they were basically just like, yeah, hey, that's why your mom was writing all this stuff, and you never wrote anything, and now you do.
See, that's where I got lucky. Was mine was in the right frontal lobe, and you start getting back into the recesses of the brain back there, and you get into things like motor control and areas that are problematic to cut into. More so. Yeah, usually in the frontal lobes, you've got like executive higher functions, personality, that sort of thing, and I have no deficit, but I hear of so many people that have them, near other areas of the brain and that have a far worse outcome. So I'm fortunate in that respect.
Man, so how did you tune into the fact that you might have something going on?
I was slightly dizzy.
Yeah, like
in
vertigo? I mean,
not that violent, and it was very intermittent. Like, I first started noticing it summer of 2018, and I noticed it in the car, of all places. Like, this is hard to explain, but the physics of what was happening to my body of going around curves, hitting bumps, and that sort of thing felt greatly exaggerated inside my head over what was actually happening to me. And I felt like an occasional electrical wave, impulse, if you will, inside my head when those things happened. And I was a little bit dizzy and off balance, and I thought, maybe my inner ear, my balance is a little bit off, if I've got fluid in there, if something's going on, so I started with an ENT, and he took a look and he's like, your ears are fine, just to rule anything else out, why don't you go see a neurologist? So I did, and took an EEG, and brain waves were beautiful, perfectly normal. And they did an MRI just as a last resort, as an afterthought, and there it was.
When they do an MRI on your head, is it just your head going the thing? They put your whole body in
Well,
there?
you go up in the tube, but it just scans, head and neck, basically.
Okay.
But, it was such a roller coaster the way it happened. That's never the news you expect to hear.
How did you, if you don't mind me asking, how did you take it? Like, a doctor comes back in, tells you what's wrong, like, how'd that make you feel?
He came in very casually, and he said, well, we found a little glioma in the right frontal lobe. So a glioma, you have a group of cells in the brain called glial cells that support the neurons, and one type of glial cell is an astrocyte.
How do you spell that?
Which part?
Glial.
GLIAL.
Okay.
And then you have astrocytes that are glial cells that support the function of the neurons with nutrition and things like that, So that family of tumors is broadly called gliomas because they arise from the glial cells, and the particular type that I wound up having is an astrocytoma because it formed from astrocytes. So, he came in, he said, well, you got this little glioma in your right frontal lobe, but it's tiny. It's 3 millimeters, it's what, an eighth of an inch or something like that. He said, I'm going to refer you to a surgeon over at Baptist, and they'll probably just watch it, And I thought, okay. So and that's all the dude said. He's gone, and I thought, oh, great, So that appointment was made, and, my mom, had an appointment with another physician who recommended another neurosurgeon that I actually wound up going to.
Which is like one of the best in the U.S., right?
Ali Krish. She's director of the Arkansas Neuroscience Institute. So ahead of that appointment, I go pick up my MRI disc with the images of the films and the report where I had the MRI done to take with me to that appointment, And I get out in the parking lot after picking that up, and I open the envelope and read the paper report, and it says 3 centimeters, not 3 millimeters. I think, well, I'm dead. Because it says there's a 3 centimeter mass in the right frontal lobe, margins are poorly defined. And I thought, okay, it's infiltrating surrounding tissue, and I'm toast, and it's that big,
Yeah.
So
So what you're saying is that from your first appointment to that appointment, it grew that much?
No.
Or he underreported it?
He misspoke. The neurologist clearly did not look at the films.
Oh, man.
Read the report and just misspoke centimeters to millimeters. And, that's all the difference in the world, frankly. So I'm like falling apart at that point. I'm starting to think about making arrangements, and I think I'm done. So,
Did you, real quick, did you experience any, if you don't mind speaking on this stuff, like any anxiety? Like,
it's terrifying. Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be terrifying, but like, had you ever felt any kind of way like this before in your whole life? Like,
No, that's, when it's staring you in the face and you pretty sure you're done shortly and it's going to be bad. Yeah. So
I can't imagine.
But I go to the appointment. He takes a look at the films in another room. Then he comes in and he says, it's not 3 centimeters. That radiologist, had it off. It's between 1 and 1.5. And he said it appears to be low grade. They grade those things 1 through 4. 1 is benign, basically. Grade 2, it's beginning to become malignant, and at that point can start infiltrating surrounding tissues. And grades 3 and 4, it's very infiltrative and diffuse. And
what grade were you?
2.
Okay.
He said it appears to be low grade, a grade 2. He said closer to a grade 1 than a grade 3. And I'm like, okay. And he said, I'm going to go in there and resect it, and if I can get good margins and get it all, your prognosis is good. Essentially normal. That's what he said. And I said, okay. So a couple of weeks later, they went in, took it out. It was on the inside of the right frontal lobe above my right eye. So basically, with the craniotomy, they took off the right half of my...
I can't even... until you pointed that out, I couldn't even notice.
Right there, yeah.
That's perfect with your hairline.
And it's 8 inches long and had 40 staples in it. But...
what is this? Is this a separate scar on your eye right here on the
Yeah, I actually got that when I was a kid on a Tonka truck when I was like 2. So
I had some metal Tonka trucks. Dude.
Yeah, they
don't hit your cousin.
They don't make them like they used to.
That's true.
But yeah, so they went in and basically took off the right side of my forehead, and it was fairly deep in the head, but not deep into the brain tissue, because it was that cleft between the lobes. It was just on the inside of the right frontal lobe there. So he basically parted the lobes.
Did he film it? Did you watch the...
It is filmed. Every surgery they do is broadcast in a theater in the building next door for students and residents to watch live. So
cool.
So he went in and resected it off the inside of the right frontal lobe, and it wound up being 2 centimeters when they got it out of there. And then, put my head back together, and, I woke up 3 hours afterward and started texting people. And yeah, he said that, since I had no deficit pre-op, due to neuroplasticity, the brain had created a pathway around that tumor and had relearned, to do what it was doing before that damaged area could no longer do.
Isn't that wild?
And, since he wasn't cutting through any healthy tissue to get to it, I should wake up the same person I was when I went under, and I did, fortunately.
How was recovery?
They always say like day 3 is the worst. Day 3 is the worst.
What happened on day 3?
That's when all the swelling reaches its peak and all that sort of thing. Just like, I was freaked out at first because just from the trauma, I couldn't control the left side of my mouth and tongue. And I woke up and I thought, okay, it's numb and I don't have any control here. My speech is a little slurred because, my tongue doesn't work on one side. And they said, yeah, we really think that's just from the trauma of what's been done. It's not a permanent issue. So they sent, speech therapy up to my room and gave me some exercises to do with that tongue. And after several days, it did come back. But, I woke up after surgery and started taking selfies and texting people. Yeah. Like 3 hours after they closed me up. And then on day 2, it really started to swell. And then by day 3, it was gnarly. And I'm allergic to steroids, so they couldn't give me prednisone to keep the inflammation down. Yeah. And that just made it worse. So,
man, I wonder, I've had prednisone 2 times now. Yeah. And I will never take it again. It made me feel like I was going crazy.
It causes fluid to collect behind my retinas. Oddly enough, of all things. Condition called CSR, central serous retinopathy. So I, avoided that, which just made the swelling worse. But anyway, I had a 3-day hospital stay, sent me home. They took the staples out 2 weeks later. I was so excited because you can't wash your hair, while those things are in there. And I thought, okay, I'm finally going to get to scrub my hair. It's going to feel great. And I get in the shower after they pull the staples off, and I can't feel anything up there. They severed all those nerves.
Yeah. How's it feeling now?
It's all back. It took about a year to come back, but it's weird when you're standing in a hot shower and you can neither feel the temperature of the water or the sensation of the water on your scalp.
That is, I had a 12 staple surgery site in my groin for an inguinal hernia repair.
Yeah.
Same sort of stuff. It was a week for me before I could shower, and I just didn't touch it for like years. Like doing jiu-jitsu, when people will be in between your legs on top and try and like push your hips down.
Right.
No. Like, I got so good at stopping people from doing that to me.
Keeping away from that area?
Yeah. I mean, it was just like my protection of like, you don't get to ever.
Yeah.
And it's a common thing for people to push down on that in certain positions. And but man, it's still to this day, I feel twinges if I run a lot.
Right.
I feel it feels odd.
And I occasionally get a shallow twinge in my scalp, not down in the cranium, but in the skin under the surface, you know. But it took about a year for that sensation to come back, and it felt not really like typical neuropathy, but it felt I would have occasional sharp pain with those nerves regenerating, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I got out of it pretty cleanly. No radiation, no chemo, since he was able to get it all. And got good margins. I go back every 6 months right now for an MRI.
You said you're going back tomorrow.
Going back tomorrow morning for my 18-month follow-up. Yeah, and then they said over time they will stretch out those intervals for about 5 years before I'm.
Have you looked at other patients that have gone through the same thing, similar size and everything? How is it for them years down the road?
You know, it's odd. These things have a tendency to recur in a lot of cases, but also a lot of cases they're not complete resections. Like where we were talking about earlier in the other areas of the brain, they often can't get it all without getting into something that can't be cut into, you know. So he says the odds of it coming back are less than the odds that it won't. And he said it's, you know, there's no part left, margins are good and all that sort of thing. And he says essentially normal prognosis. And he said, you know, trust what I'm telling you because I'm going to tell you the truth. So that's what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're into flying, or you were like, how has this affected all?
I was a student pilot back a couple of years ago, and this killed that. Yeah. Have I seen you still go up with other people? I fly as air crew.
Okay.
Yeah, like right seat and back seat with Civil Air Patrol. Yeah.
How'd you get into all that?
I had a good friend who became the Arkansas wing commander. So Civil Air Patrol is the volunteer civilian auxiliary of the Air Force, and we do domestic missions like search and rescue and that sort of thing. I had a good friend who became the Arkansas wing commander, and I didn't know what CAP was at the time. And then, you know, just asked him about it, and, you know, he sort of filled me in on what's going on, and I just went down and signed up. It'll be 6 years in January. It's very rewarding for me. I was in an odd position. I could not pass a standard military physical because I had flat feet and couldn't run very far at all. They've since been surgically corrected, but now I've got titanium in both feet.
Wow. Tell me about that real quick. How did something you've dealt with your whole life?
Yeah, it was always there. It did not become really severely symptomatic until my early 20s.
What are the symptoms?
Your feet just roll over, basically. Because the posterior tibial tendon runs from the inside of the arch of the foot, goes up, wraps around the ankle, and goes up into your calf. Those tendons are what keep your ankles up and aligned and create the arches in your feet. So in people who have, you know, acquired adult flat foot, those tendons become stretched and torn over time, and the foot just collapses. You know, and I always had flat feet, but it did not become. I mean, by the time I was in my early 20s, I was having difficulty walking, you know, much less doing anything else.
Wow.
But
you wanted to get into them. I was about to ask you if you've been in the military just based off everything we were talking about.
That's what I wanted to do, and then life had other plans. So, yeah, anyway, 4 surgeries later and implants and all that sort of thing, the feet are corrected. And, you know, through CAP, you know, we're civilian auxiliaries who assist with part of the domestic Air Force mission. So it scratches that itch for me to a certain degree. It allows me to, get a little bit of that experience and also serve my community and my country in a worthwhile
You're
way.
a civil servant.
Yeah, basically.
It's a civil servant sort of duty.
So it satisfies that sort of part of me that I feel like I missed.
Yeah.
You know, and then I was exploring being a student pilot, and then had the tumor, and everyone post-op there at least is put on an anticonvulsant called Keppra.
Mm-hmm.
Most people present with headaches and seizures. That's how they find their brain tumors. I never had those. I've never had a seizure.
Just the other day, my guitar player, teacher, had a seizure in this studio.
Really?
Yeah. We were done with our lesson, and he told me during the lesson, he's like, I'm not feeling good. And he's telling me he had seizures. And I walked out to go get a water or something out, and I come back in, and it wasn't like he wasn't in the floor. He was just in his chair.
Yeah.
And he was having a seizure, and I was like, Paul, you all right, dude? And I just sat here with him until he started coming back. But, man, it took him a long time.
So initially he wasn't responsive?
Initially he was just kind of doing this sort of weird thing with his fingers and nodding, kind of shaking a little bit. He was sitting up. And then when he came sort of back to normal and he couldn't talk to me, he's like...
Yeah.
And then he would just... It just took him a while before he could talk. And then he couldn't walk.
And almost everyone I know who's presented with a brain tumor, they found it after a seizure. That was like the first, they just got hit with a seizure out of nowhere, and, that's how they found it on MRI afterward. Mm-hmm. I just didn't get to that point. I just became aware of it before, thankfully, it got, and that never happened. But anyway, they put everyone post-op on an anticonvulsant called Keppra that, sometimes they say when the brain is messed with, it reacts by throwing out seizures, whether you've had one before or not. When you go in there and start, doing things to it, it reacts that way.
Do you still take this Keppra?
No. They put it on for 6 months, put me on it for 6 months, and then they did an EEG to check for seizure activity, and there was none there. So they took me off of it, which is good because it makes you just drag. It slows everything down, basically, and you're tired all the time. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the FAA doesn't like Keppra. So... So there goes my student pilot certificate.
Yeah. So you don't just having taken that Keppra, it's not even the procedure per se. Well,
it's not so much the procedure or the Keppra itself. It's what the Keppra is supposed to be preventing. The FAA is very broad. They paint with a broad brush when it comes to those sort of things. So by flying as air crew and, doing some disaster relief missions and search and rescue, I get to scratch the flying itch to a certain degree without being a pilot.
Do you think you would have wanted to do Air Force? What branch were you interested in?
I was leaning toward going in the Army because that's what my dad, Dad was Army. My granddad started out in the Navy in World War II and then wound up in the Guard, for a career after that. And that was my inclination, but it just wasn't to be.
Yeah.
So,
well, it seems like you have a great attitude about it. I'd probably be talking to everybody how pissed off I was. I didn't get to do what I wanted.
I was for a while, but.
Which, yeah, man, that is, but I mean, it's like potential shoulder surgery or whatever. Like life throws you some totally unexpected curveballs.
It really does.
Like I was telling my wife the other day, I was like, now, while I'm a pretty healthy dude, I never thought life would be as complex as it currently is for me.
Yeah.
With
you're a young guy too.
What I'm doing here.
Yeah.
And what I'm doing at the university and the podcast and.
Yeah.
I just didn't think I would be this divided up, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, I get it. When I was slightly dizzy and thought I had an inner ear problem, the last thing I thought about was a brain tumor. I mean, nobody does. But I guess the moral of that story is pay attention to your body and your symptoms, and if you feel something weird going on, get checked.
Yeah.
Because you never know. Because usually by the time they catch these things, it's too late.
Yeah. Yeah, well, hopefully somebody listening to this.
The most common brain tumor is actually the grade 4, the glioblastoma, which, average survival with treatment is 14 months, and without treatment it's like 90 days. And that's the most common because people they're not aware of it until it's reached that point.
Wow.
So, yeah, if you feel something going on, by all means, get it looked at.
Man, the older I get. So how old were you when this happened?
38? Yeah, I was 38 when I was 37 at the onset of symptoms and 38 when it was removed, and I'm now 39.
dude, the older I get, the more since I've entered my 30s, the
Yeah.
more I'll have something I'm like, well, I've never felt that before.
Well,
Should I go?
Yeah.
I've never felt this way. Like,
Right.
you start second guessing things more, I guess. I don't know.
yeah, little aches and pains that weren't there before, and little odd. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, and it takes I can see why people don't catch things, because like even my shoulder, I'm like just now,
Yeah.
a year in, I'm like, oh, I could go way over here.
like, oh, bad idea.
That's it, dude. And I'm like, I'm sure I'm fine. Let me do that exercise some more,
Yeah. Let's just work this out. Yeah.
But it's like a slow process for you to realize, I guess our body is so resilient that it finds ways to
Human
adapt.
body's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
I mean, on every level, really.
Man, imagine you would have been in the ancient world and they're like, Justin.
Oh, you just died.
Well, have you, so like, speaking of Africa, we're talking about Africa, in Africa, like they have some of the longest running traditions of brain surgery. The Egyptians did brain surgery.
Oh, yeah, like trepanning people and, boring holes in your skull and, yeah.
When I was watching, so in some African villages, they still do this. Right? And it's like, ding, 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 ding,
Yeah.
sort of a deal,
Yeah, and there's that half-baked theory out there of people that advocate trepanning that, the brain needs more room to expand and increase blood flow to increase cognition, so they accomplish that by boring a hole in their skull as an expansion outlet, basically. There's a short film that was done like in the 60s or 70s back there where a woman sits down and trepans herself in front of a mirror under the theory that it will increase her cognition. I forget the name of the film, but there's a movement out there that is dedicated to that.
Here's one I joke about frequently. President Washington, you have a throat infection.
Yeah.
We're going to need to get some of that blood out.
Yeah.
Bleeding.
Bring on the leeches.
Yeah. Oh, man.
We just need to rebalance your humors and everything's going to be fine.
Humoralism. I learned that from Dr. Gleason when I was in at Tech. But, man, that's a wild thought. But, like, I've always gone a little further with that, and it's just conjecture, I guess. But George Washington did have a minor throat infection.
Yeah.
They did bleed him, and he ended up dying of it.
Right.
That's the official cause of death. He also, did we talk about his teeth on display at Mount Vernon?
I think we have. I've been there. Yeah.
You've seen it?
Yeah, I have.
Oh.
Yeah.
I wonder if that had anything to do with the infection.
It makes you wonder. Makes you go,
Just like, like hygiene.
Yeah.
It just in general, like, Civil War, pre-hypodermic needles, like all these things that have come along in the United States.
Yeah, back when they were doing amputations in tents and using the same saw on the next guy as the last guy with no sterilization I mean, you even look back in the ancient world. I mean, on campaigns, how many of those people died on campaign from disease and illness and all that versus how many were killed in combat?
Yeah.
I mean, they based campaigns around, the summer because that's when an army could move and forage and feed itself, and everyone went into winter quarters, just to sort things out. And then, during the winter, a lot of those guys died.
I never thought about this, but you hear stories about locals filling in wells when there's invading armies, right?
Right.
Pretty common. But also, on the Napoleon research the other day, that when they marched from Alexandria to Cairo, 130 miles on the desert road, not prepared, they're wearing wool, and they don't have canteens with them.
Yeah.
So they did find some wells, but there's like, I think they marched 35,000 soldiers across, and they had 55,000 soldiers total. But they would periodically get to a well, but they would empty it in minutes. And at one of these wells, 30 French soldiers committed suicide.
Yeah.
After the well was empty.
Right.
And their rations, biscuits.
Yeah.
So like that's this one historian was talking about. He's like, imagine eating a biscuit while you're marching across the desert and you have no water.
And you're dying of thirst.
And it's like literally like the dust and the sand.
Yeah.
Like everything is just, oh man.
And you had, in those old campaigns, you had things like cholera, at water
They
sources.
got they got to the Nile, jumped in, drank, ate melons out of the water patch, and then half of them got dysentery.
Oh,
the
yeah.
next day they
Yeah.
fought the Mamelukes.
There's all sorts of bad things, latent in Africa, dengue fever, and yeah.
Yeah.
You don't drink the water unfiltered or untreated.
Yeah, I have never gotten sick drinking, which I've never drank any water in Mexico, but I've been to Mexico a few times. And the first time I went, somebody that was with us, I guess it accidentally brushed their teeth with the water, or they didn't even consume a lot of it.
Got
They
enough of it.
Super sick, man.
Yeah.
Just for the whole rest of the trip.
Yeah, it's like, talking about Vietnam, the purification tablets, they'd issue for sterilizing water, and, made it almost as undrinkable. I mean, it was potable, but, you'd rather not drink it and use that stuff if you had an alternative. So,
Man, McCool and Ray, they're at the university, talk about McCool's still in, and Ray's retired.
Yeah.
But they were in the same unit for a long time. They're talking about eating rations the other day, like dry rations.
the MREs.
Yeah, MREs.
Yeah.
And they were just hearing them talk about it was hilarious, because they were talking about their favorite things, and then things you didn't want to get, and then what all was in it, cigarettes, all this stuff.
Yeah.
Wow.
I've eaten a lot of those things myself. You get a case of those things, take them to deer camp or whatever, and, go out there. They've gotten better than they used to be. Like the early incarnations of the MREs and Desert Storm era and all that were pretty dismal, but they have improved. Everybody that ate them that I know actually loved the old sea rations in the cans.
Yeah.
That stuff was, one, it had moisture in it. He said it was especially Dad and my granddad said the same thing. It was a better quality ration than the later, stuff they developed after that. Didn't keep, forever like some of the dehydrated stuff, but it was better food.
Yeah.
So,
like a mummy is pretty much just a dehydrated human.
Basically desiccated.
You ever heard of the part of it that they cure the mummy in is for 35 days is called natrum. It's it occurs around water sources, certain water sources in Egypt. It's pretty common. It's like a salt that occurs, and also a baking soda, a naturally.
Okay.
And they remove your brain, your organs, all this stuff, and then they smear resin all over you, and then they put this natrum on you.
Yeah.
And that dries you out and sucks you up. So this guy was like, hey, you know how you're able to eat blueberries in your cereal for, however long they've been in there? It's because they're dehydrated, like a mummy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
In 94, they did this mummification, working off Herodotus's source, all the ancient sources, really, that they could get a hold of. Papyri. There's this one thing called Bilingual Papyr. It's actually a Roman occupation.
Okay.
From a tomb then. That gives some, but these there were embalmer families in Egypt that kept that a state secret, pretty much, right? But they did it, and they soaked them in the natrum for 70 days. Okay. And there was some speculation. A bunch of places said to do it 70 days, some said 35. And at 35, they're like, he still looks too gooey. But then they soaked him for 70 more, and then they tried to they went to wrap him. And
he's still a little gooey. Let's rewrap him.
Well, at 70 days, they couldn't. So what they would do is they would wrap him at 35. They would be so locked out at 70, they couldn't move them into the position to be wrapped. Yeah. So they end up wrapping the mummy where it's splayed out just like they laid it on the table.
Just however he was when he,
Yeah.
I wonder if that's like down in East Africa, you have the naturally occurring soda pans. Like at Amboseli and all those places, you have these massive lakes, essentially, of naturally occurring soda on the ground.
Yeah, that's it. That's got to be the same thing.
Huh.
Yeah. Natrum. I can't remember. I think it's Natrom.
Interesting.
Natrum. But this when this guy Bob Breyer was doing it, he did it for Discovery Channel. They did 1994, I think, is the year they did it. But he went out and got the natrum himself from a
collected
lake.
it.
Yeah, broke it up, took it, and that was just part of the.
Well, if you're wanting to recreate that as closely as you can, that'd be the way to do it, authentically as you can.
Yeah.
Replicate that process in every step. I guess. It was logical.
Speaking of brains, you know, they pulled your brain out through your nose. That sounds like a wild thing. I remember reading Herodotus' account. But
today they remove pituitary brain tumors through the sinuses. Yeah.
Wow.
Because they still use that route for certain brain surgeries.
Yeah, man.
Like the pituitary gland is basically right in the middle. I mean, it's in a terrible place to try to access. And pituitary tumors are usually not, they're not malignant, but they press on the optic nerves in the back of the eyes, and they often cause blindness and that sort of thing. To get at it, they go through your nose and your sinuses to get up there in the basically the bottom, the underneath part of your brain.
They got to break that bone to get in.
I would assume. I don't see how you could get around it without not. Yeah.
Apparently, they for the whole brain, they essentially scrambled it.
Oh,
and drained it
like a lobotomy when they went through your eye socket with an ice pick, basically. Go in there and just stick an ice pick down the side of your eyeball and wiggle it around a little bit, scramble up your frontal lobes, and pull it back out, and you're good to go. You're cured.
You'll be fine.
Yeah.
You ever read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest?
I have not read it. No.
It's so sad. I kind of saw the ending of it coming. You ever seen the movie?
That's the yeah.
I haven't seen the movie.
I don't think I want to read the book for that reason.
So you know how it ends, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Man, I need to see the movie. Michael Booty and I have talked about doing a series of podcasts over it. Like, I mentioned that earlier, I like picking let's do a podcast over the films of Errol Flynn. We've been doing a series, the Lost Cause Myth through film. Mm-hmm. Right? It's been a super fun one to get into, right? It's just like we compared and contrasted Gettysburg and Gods and Generals. Okay. You ever see either one of those?
Yeah, it's been a while, but yeah.
Gods and Generals are a rough watch, man. I suffered through that one. Gettysburg, man, when I was a kid, I love that movie. And it's not as rich with some of the Lost Cause myth. It is Gods and Generals. Gods and Generals pretty thick with it.
I saw an interesting movie a while back. It's not really in that vein, but it had a little cameo by John Bell Hood.
Oh, really?
It's called In the Electric Mist.
Yeah.
Or like Tommy Lee Jones is a contemporary detective down in Louisiana, and he starts having these visions of John Bell Hood, like appearing to him, and he's a recovering alcoholic, and he's not sure if he's hallucinating these things or if he's actually seeing John Bell Hood.
The Electric Mist?
Tommy
Lee Jones.
And John Bell Hood appears and sort of gives him advice about a homicide case he's working. Periodically, like he's just sitting around and there's General Hood,
wow.
over there, and gives him a little tidbit and kind of nudges him in one direction. Then he's gone, and a while later he'll show back up. And it was an intriguing premise.
Yeah, man, I love Tommy Lee Jones.
And it was,
ever since I was a kid.
It was Levon Helm as John Bell Hood.
Oh, dude, I gotta watch that.
Yeah.
The band.
Yeah, the band.
Oh, man.
From where was he from? Marvel,
Arkansas.
Yeah.
I guess Ray Trower is the hugest band fan.
Is he?
As a matter of fact, I just ordered a new turntable, and I'm gonna have Ray on. We're gonna listen to vinyls the whole time he's on. He's a huge audiophile.
There you go.
Right, but he'll tell you anything you want to know about the band Levon Helm. Oh, Levon from Turkey Track, Arkansas. It's like, I guess the community or what the locals call it or something.
Yeah,
he knows that song The Wait talks about wait a minute, Chester.
Okay.
He's like, Chester was a real person. So was this person, and they lived here, and that guy's buried in that cemetery.
Right. Yeah, that's you gotta look that movie up. It's interesting. I've never seen one.
When did it come out, man? It would have had to been a while.
It's been a few years ago, not all that long. John Goodman's in it. Yeah.
Levon Helm, he was in that movie, The Shooter, with Mark Wahlberg. You seen that?
Yeah, he was the armorer, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was the crazy old former sniper.
Yeah.
And he goes to see him, and he grabs his hand. He does like that, and he goes, "Things ain't always what they seem, is they, Gunny?" Like, as soon as he touches him, he's like, "I know what you do."
Yeah.
So I remember then, that was maybe the first time, that movie came out in 2005, and that was maybe the first time I knew who Levon Helm was.
There's very few movies that come out these days that I really enjoy. Like in the last 15 years or so, there's just been a handful. I'm an old movie buff, like 50s, 60s, 70s.
What are some of your favorites?
Well, if we're talking old stuff, I like the old mercenary movies, like Dark of the Sun, the Rod Taylor, The Wild Geese, Richard Burton. Yeah, going back, a childhood favorite is The Omega Man with Charlton Heston.
Okay.
From Richard Matheson's I Am Legend,
Yeah.
Yeah, I still love that movie. It's just pure nostalgia for me because I had an old VHS copy when I was a kid.
You know what? Speaking of classics, I grew up on that I had really enjoyed the I guess it would have been 59, I think it came out, Spartacus.
Oh, yeah.
With
60, yeah.
Yeah, 1960, yeah. Who was...
Kirk Douglas.
Kirk Douglas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's another? There's a one that's little known and not very seen from 1977 called Sorcerer. It's made by William Friedkin. It's about 4 guys on the run who have all coalesced and wound up in this little South American village. And they're all, running from the law, essentially. One is a Palestinian terrorist. One is a French investment banker who's called embezzling. One is a driver for the mob from New Jersey. And then the 4th one's a Mexican assassin.
Sorcerer is what this
And they wind up down there, and they're hired by a local oil company, or actually an American company, to drive a truckload of leaky dynamite cross country, and basically a suicide mission to use it to cap off a burning well. And that movie is phenomenal.
Oh, man. I'm glad we're having this part of the conversation.
And
I love film, man.
You could not find it until recently, and a DVD was released a few years ago, so it's at least accessible now. I found an old VHS copy from the 80s. It was recorded when I was a kid off of HBO, and it was a terrible old TV copy, and that's the only copy I'd ever seen until a few years ago when it was released on DVD and Blu-ray.
Man, isn't it wild to think how far we've come since VCRs?
Yeah, I started with a VCR back in the early 80s. We had one of the first ones when the remote had a cord on it.
Oh,
and
wow.
had stop and record. I think it had a switch, not even buttons. Had a switch when you were recording, and everything else you went up and actually punched the console.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was.
Do you remember the
back, and it was $600 back in the early 80s.
The tracking buttons or the dials that you would have to hit to dial it in.
Yeah.
That's wild.
I mean, that VCR was like $600 in like 1982 or something like that. So adjust that for inflation.
Did your old HBO copy have the remember how so I had a Lonesome Dove copy record off TV like that.
Yeah.
And I watched it so many times when I was a kid. Periodically it would like music or something. It'd have like a little hiccup in it.
Oh, yeah, in the background. I've had other VH movies that had that. I don't know if that one did or not, but I know what you're talking about.
I think it might have happened from like rewinding them too much or something. It would just have like a little little hiccup in it.
That's the thing about magnetic tape is, it degrades over time. Possibly it's physically worn when it's rewound and all that sort of thing. And how far we've come.
Now we're starting to understand disc rot. Like some of my old CDs, you can see through them.
Okay, have they been in like a damp environment? Usually, I've heard that if you leave like a disc like that in a damp environment, it will degrade. Where you can have like pinholes, where you hold it up to a light, you can see through it.
On some of those music CDs, possibly. I don't know. Like my house is pier and beam, but I've got like plastic, like thick plastic underneath it on the ground to keep some of the moisture out. But we are on a hill.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's like you go down a hill, then there's a flat spot, and that's my house, and then it keeps going down the hill. And Pleasant View over here, we're on the back side of Pleasant View, so we're down in the valley, and it is kind of damp down there.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I could definitely see that degrading.
So, let me ask you: have you been watching season 2 of The Mandalorian?
Yes, I've seen.
And what do you think about episodes 1 and 2?
First off, we're doing a review podcast of episode 1 and 2 on Wednesday.
Well, I don't want to steal your thunder.
No. We'll talk about it. But so do you think that was Boba Fett at the end?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Like as soon as I saw that armor.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I was like,
Bo was going to show up, or
have you seen my Star Wars collection over here? It's part of it.
I did notice that.
It's part of it.
Yeah.
I almost have the whole 95 through 2000 original trilogy re-release of the action figures.
Wow.
And almost all the Micro Machines too.
Nice.
So like when I was growing up, that was like my childhood. And I did.
Oh yeah, me too. Yeah.
Like I'll tell you too, this pisses some people off when I tell them this, but 'cause I did. I almost have the whole 95 through 2000 original trilogy re-release of the action figures. Wow. And almost all the Micro Machines too. So like when I was growing up, that was like my childhood. And I I'm gonna open all those and put them on display at different areas of the podcast.
My shocked face.
I'm gonna film myself opening them just to piss people off and upload it and be like, I'm playing with these.
Oh, what a mean man you are.
Yeah. Oh, you know, fans are gonna lose it.
Yeah.
But man,
heads will explode all over.
I have loved The Mandalorian. I can't tell you. I watched those first season episodes.
Yeah.
I've seen all of them at least 3 times.
Yeah, season 1 was great.
Yeah.
My one critique about season 2 is that first episode, it got a little cheesy and campy. They went a little too far with the Western angle, I think.
I agree.
You know?
They've done that a time or two.
You know, before there was kind of a Sergio Leone spaghetti Western-esque feel to this. Very lean, very, well done. But they kind of took it into the realm of camp in that first episode, that we're talking about there.
What do you think about the Sand People? How they're depicting them versus how we have perceived them all the way until this show.
Yeah, I mean, basically, in the old movies, you thought of them as just savages, out there, basically ignoble savages out there, doing savage things. And he actually seems to have some sort of rapport. And
one of them's brushing the teeth of the...
Yeah. But he actually, can communicate with them and all that sort of thing. So it's interesting. One thing about these first 2 episodes kind of bothered me. They've both essentially been like monster movies. Self-contained, you've got, like, episode 1 was a little mini self-contained Western monster movie. Mm-hmm. And then, in the second one, you wind up with the cave with the eye spiders and all that. It's another monster movie. And I don't know. I'm hoping they change course and do something more along the lines of what they were doing last time around.
Yeah, they do. You ever watch X-Files?
I did back in the day.
So, you know how, like, there was really multiple plot lines going on, but you could reduce it down to 2. It's like you got the alien plot line and you got the monsters of the week. And I've got that vibe with Mandalorian a time or two.
And I think that would have been fine this time around if they had spaced them out. Mm-hmm. Like if there wasn't one following right on the heels of another monster movie.
Yeah.
I have no issues with that concept, but when it's back to back and then just keeps, it's kind of like, well,
it didn't move the plot forward. That's how I felt with the last episode. It was cool.
Yeah.
But when it was over, I was like, oh, it's over. Nothing happened.
Yeah. He has not actually gotten very far from the season started.
Man, and too, I was joking with my wife about this last night or something, but it's really stressing me out, Baby Yoda eating all those eggs. Right?
Yeah, it was weird. I thought, those are, that person's offspring.
She's super worried about her eggs.
And they played it for comedy relief, the child sitting over there and occasionally he just like sucks one down,
the very end.
Like, that's a little unsettling.
Oh, man. Yeah, that eye spider scene was intense, dude.
Yeah. It's that series is very well crafted.
Favreau, who would have, I know he did some work on like the Clone Wars cartoon, or the Clone Wars cartoon.
Right.
But, man, you wouldn't think that guy would be doing as good of a job as he's doing. It's
so superior to me over the last 3 movies.
Yeah.
It returns back to the old original lean storytelling of Star Wars, and it's not geared for, I don't know, popular youth consumption, I guess.
And 2, I like it. I like it for that nostalgia of the original trilogy, sort of throwback, but I also like it, man. I feel like Mandalorian's a little bit of a standalone. Like, you could come in on Mandalorian and not be a huge Star Wars
fan.
I
have a good friend who is not, and she said she likes the series because it doesn't require extensive prior knowledge. Mm-hmm. And I see that point. Yeah.
Well, and if she wanted that prior knowledge, she's watching on Disney Plus, where all Star Wars are located, right?
Yeah.
When my wife had COVID, she watched the whole original trilogy, and then we had recently seen the newer trilogy. But she watched the first 2 movies of the newer trilogy too. She got better from COVID and stopped watching Star Wars.
I have a tendency when I'm holed up sick, I'll watch something like the old miniseries Shogun. You ever seen Shogun?
No.
With Richard Chamberlain. It's based on the James Clavell novel. It's like 12 hours long.
Is it a series?
Yeah, it was. It was shown.
I do know that was when I was a kid. That was coming on TV.
It was shown originally in like 1980, 81, somewhere back in there, and then it was syndicated, I think, once after that. And I read the book when I was a kid. It's this massive, epic novel by Clavell. And finally, you know, when I was a teenager, got a hold of a copy of the miniseries, and now have it on Blu-ray and watch it occasionally. And it's yeah.
You ever get into the old school David Carradine Kung Fu series?
Not really. I've watched some of it when I was a kid.
Same. That same show you're mentioning, like my mother-in-law bought me the whole 3 seasons of Kung Fu. If you ever want to borrow it, you can. But that was like when I was a kid. That was another one that was coming on. Like came on several different shows, and they were even revamping it. The Legend Continues.
I remember when
90s.
that was on. Yeah. Back when I was a teenager. I remember a copy of a TV movie that was made in the 70s. I don't know if it was a precursor to the original series of Kung Fu, but I remember having a copy of that at one time when I was a kid.
I want to say they're like a couple of movies from that time, perhaps.
I remember he was in the desert, and then some guys come looking for him from his past. Oh, it's been 30 years.
So the idea, what do you think about this, is that, or have you heard that Bruce Lee came up with the whole concept for that show, and then they turned around, took it, the whole concept, cast David Carradine, wouldn't cast him because he was Asian?
I don't have enough knowledge to have an opinion. Honestly, I don't know enough about it to.
That's something I've heard. Like I got a ton. All those books right there on this side of the second shelf are Bruce Lee books, right? The second shelf down on closest to us.
Right.
I have several. Tao Jeet Kune Do. Like, dude, just being martial arts, like you got to get into Bruce Lee. There's a Bruce Lee action figure right there.
So did Once Upon a Time in Hollywood piss you off?
Man, I'm kind of, after going through all this stuff with Bruce Lee, like I don't have a very high opinion of the guy.
Yeah.
As a person. So
there was
it didn't piss me off too bad. It sure as hell pissed the family off.
There was an arrogance there and an attitude that I see what you're saying. I don't know. I love that movie.
Oh, Once Upon a Time, me too,
yeah.
man. I watched it 3 times since it's come out, and I like back to back to back kind of a deal, like pretty close nearby.
Best thing I've seen in years. That's a new release.
When was it? I guess over the summer, I watched all of Tarantino's films.
Yeah, see, and I'm generally not a Tarantino fan.
Some of it's trying for me.
That one I just love. There's been I said I'm an old movie guy. There's been a few movies in the last few years that I've liked. Kingdom of Heaven.
Oh, yeah. I got to rewatch
Love
that.
it.
I just saw, we were watching, what was Master and Commander?
Yeah.
And it was the advertisements at the beginning,
So have you seen the extended director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven?
Ooh, I want to say, yeah.
I think it's only available on the Blu-ray. It's got both versions, and it's like 45 minutes longer.
Okay.
Makes it a totally different. Yeah, the old cliche. It's a totally different movie. In this case, it is a totally different movie.
I'll
it
look
adds
into that.
plot lines and characters that weren't in the theatrical. Yeah. That one's. I love that one. And
well, the DVD I have is a 2-disc, but what you're saying, if maybe new, I don't know.
I don't know. I have the Blu-ray copy, but you may have both versions. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a great one. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, we talked about. I love Haywire.
Haywire?
Gina Carano.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Steven Soderbergh. Yeah.
Do you think Gina Carano... So I've heard some weird things about Gina Carano coming back to Mandalorian. First, she was recast, everything's good. And I guess she's in this season for sure.
Right.
But she apparently made and doubled down on some remarks, and cancel culture's coming after her.
Really?
Yeah. Like some transphobic stuff or something like that, right?
That, that character's a fan favorite.
It is.
I mean,
she's a... maybe I know her as being famous from MMA.
Yeah.
So, it's, and it doesn't surprise me. A lot of MMA people have some weird. Have you ever heard of what Joe Rogan thinks about trans athletes? Surprised, because even people who don't listen to him knows what he thinks about it, because he comes down hard against it. He's like, you mean to tell me this person who's lived as a biological male since this, all the way, like they had kids as a biological male with their wife,
right?
And then they take some drugs and get a surgery, and now they're beating the shit out of women in the cage. And he's taken a lot of criticism for saying that, and I'm just repeating Joe Rogan's thoughts on that. But that has spread like wildfire. I mean, Joe Rogan's national taekwondo champion, jiu-jitsu black belt, UFC commentator. So everybody that is in martial arts listens to him.
Well, if they axe her for Mandalorian, I don't know that will hurt the show.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is that, that character brings a good angle,
Yeah.
And one thing I admire about Gina Carano, she is who she is, and she doesn't kowtow or bend to popular opinion, and, I admire that for her.
Let's be real, she could kick us both in the head and knock us out.
That's true.
And I like that about her.
And be attractive while doing it. Yeah.
Man, that's like my wife is an amateur. Gina Carano's a pro and professional amateur, but as a amateur, my wife won 2 kickboxing world championships.
Right.
And is like now a holy terror to deal with. She's getting a jiu-jitsu black belt this Thursday. After it takes 8 to 12 years to get a jiu-jitsu
for you
black
to
belt.
deal with, or to deal with in general.
Dude, both. But she, I mean, she could take on. I mean, over the years, guys have come in bigger than her, stronger than her, and she just has her way.
Right.
Like whether it's on the ground or sparring or whatever, and it's a rude awakening for people to get. For me, one of my original instructors was like this 142-pound, soaking wet, 6'2", skinny, and two. I was thinking about him earlier. He was born with a club foot. And his dad made him. His dad was one of these a former Green Beret. I think I've told you about in the past. A 66 to 68 South American bunch. But his dad made him a special shoe that fixed his club foot.
Really?
By the time he's like 3 or 4 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. Like he described it to me like put like a little plank up here in like the corner of it, and it like
while he was growing.
Yeah.
Basically, just reshaped it and formed it. And,
yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. So, but this guy goes on now. He owns the biggest martial arts gym in the whole state.
Right.
But when I was like my revelation of training martial arts, I'm training there, and I realized I'm like, this dorky looking dude who, if I saw walking down the street, I'd beat that dude's ass. Like, and the fact of the matter is, at that time I had no chance. One time he hit me with a body hook, and let's just say, I was excreting blood when I went to the bathroom,
Yeah.
right? Like he hit me in the kidney from behind.
Yeah.
So,
something internal is leaking.
and man, it put me down to a knee. I'll never forget the way it felt, but I was like, it was stung. It's like somebody stuck me with a knife in my kidney.
Yeah.
And but at that time I was like young, aggressive, had played football, had come in, was learning. I was like,
Thought you were a tough guy.
and then you got this 140-pound dude just like neutralizing you.
Yeah.
And even my high school tailback, all state, only guy on the team that got all state that year. And he was like, that dude could beat our ass. Like it was just blowing his mind. I was just like, I know, man. That's why I told you to come down here.
Yeah.
But imagine that being also like all that. Imagine that being a female that's your revelation.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, it's been demonstrated they're capable of it,
Yeah. Let's talk about the election for a second.
Yeah.
Without, alienating or dividing the nation further or our friends.
Good luck.
It is interesting if, I guess, as I understand it, Biden's going to be the guy. But as I also understand it, we're not quite there yet. You got any assessment on that?
I think legal challenges usually don't pan out in these things.
What have you charted? So in Michigan and another state, there was a computer voting issue.
And I honestly haven't been following.
Okay.
To be honest with you, I was tired enough of the whole thing. I just checked out.
Right before you got here, I'd seen somebody making some divisive statements, and I made a statement on Facebook about it. I was like, if this is you making these divisive statements, you're gone. Like, I'm either going to unfriend you or unfollow you, depending on who you are.
Yeah.
We don't need this right now.
Right.
But there were some computer glitches, even here in Polk County, in Russellville.
Right.
There was the same computer issue that they had in Michigan, and I think Georgia it was. But this was what happened in Russellville. They reported on like, we just removed that machine. It's fine. I'm sure that won't happen with any of the other machines. I'm sure it hasn't happened with any. But you would vote for Trump or for in this instance it was you would click for Trump and it would go to Biden.
Wow.
And they removed that. That happened in Russellville. But then nationally, there was, and I think it was 6,000 votes that were cast for, which we're talking like a 5 million margin.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But there was 6,000 votes cast for Biden that were supposed to go to Trump. Right. So those are the sorts of legal challenges that I don't know. Like what you're saying, it's like anytime there's been a recount, I don't think there's been a ton of issues. But let me show you something here real quick. That's something for us to think back on in history.
Oh yeah. Who can forget 20 years ago?
Yeah. President Gore, the Washington Times election special.
Right.
Florida pushes Gore over the top with a bare majority.
Yeah.
Now that was I don't remember. I need to compare the date of that article, but that went on for a few weeks.
Yeah.
I remember the next morning thinking there was going to be, and then it was just like, well, there's this issue with this state where the
Secretary of State got involved and down there, and yeah. I don't know it. You remember the good old days when we had an election and the next morning we knew who won? Remember those days?
Those are the days.
Better times.
Well, I was thinking about this, like, are we going to have to physically cast all our ballots to avoid... I'm not trying to be paranoid, but I do, because of I don't trust computer voting at all.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think we should leave democracy to that.
Well, one thing, glitches are like you're talking about. I also wonder if it leaves it open to intentional shenanigans.
Well, that was that came up in the last election. There were some voting machines across the country that were removed.
Yeah.
In a similar, I can't recall what the story was, but there's a few of them that had issues where they're like, oh, we got to remove those. We got to get them out.
Right.
And that was what was being tied. It undermines everybody's faith in democracy in the system.
If there's a process in this country you should have faith and confidence in, that's it.
Mm-hmm. I didn't even, and maybe I'm just not understanding the issue, but I didn't have as much of a problem with the mail-in voting as I did with the computer voting. Yeah,
I don't know. I think I'm old school. We've always had absentee ballots and that sort of thing, so there's kind of a precedent there. The difference, I think, is just scale and circumstance now.
Because of the pandemic. Yeah, that's what really shifted it for me. But
right. I don't know. Frankly, I got to a point where I thought, I don't want to vote for either one of these guys. So,
that's where I was.
So I'm like, I'm not too much of a fan of either major party anymore at this point. So, I don't know. For me, it was a lesser of two evils kind of thing.
Yeah. Man, it's
came down to who I thought would do the least amount of damage.
It's been a wild year. That's just the best way to say it.
Yeah.
I'm just glad that we're leaving this year behind. We're moving on. It's almost over. Hopefully, there's less division in 2021.
Well, people say that about, we got to get 2020 behind us, and then I'm thinking, well, things like pandemics don't care about calendars.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying. So,
do you have any thoughts on this hadn't been talked about a ton, but that there have been waves, like let's say the Spanish flu. There was the definitive waves. Billy Reeder, my friend, he lives in Perryville.
Yeah.
His grandma died in the third wave of the Spanish flu.
Okay.
Her great grandma won.
We talking like 1918?
Yeah, this would have been like she would have gotten. Like this would have been 1919, I think, when she passed away.
Okay.
So there was, looking back on that pandemic, there's like, okay, there were multiple waves that hit people, and certain people died in certain waves.
And that apparently was just a standard flu that was particularly virulent that time around, if memory serves, right?
Yeah.
It was, they just call it Spanish flu because where it arose. Doesn't memory serve?
Partially.
It was.
So that's in at the tail end of World War I.
Right.
And they call it the Spanish flu because Spain was the only nation that reported on it.
Ah, gotcha.
Right? Like everybody else was like, don't tell them that our soldiers are sick. So then that Spain started reporting on it, and that's kind of how it came to national attention. And,
you have these things throughout human history, going back to, episodes of plague or, Spanish flu. And, there's been a couple of them in Greece that they really weren't sure what it was, where an epidemic went through and killed people off. And it seems to just be a pattern in human history.
That's 1798 when Napoleon went So that he was afraid the Turks were going to invade Egypt,
Right.
and he didn't want. He invaded them first. Right. Goes to Syria.
Preemptive invasion.
Yeah, very Roman.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
We never committed an act of
We
aggression.
think you may be a problem in the future,
60
so we're
years.
just coming on over. Yeah.
I love telling the students about that. I'm like, Rome never committed an act of aggression, and Egypt never lost a battle.
Yeah.
Like, that's the Exodus story. People give that story a lot of shit. But I'm like, we're talking about a nation that never once reported anything bad happening.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you think they wouldn't leave that story out?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, one of the Egyptologists I follow, he's like, yeah, the pharaohs never lost. They would just be in Syria, and then they would lose their way back down, and the next thing you know, they're at Memphis, and they're still losing. They just keep retreating.
Advancing in the other direction.
Yeah. All the way back to Thebes.
Strategic withdrawal, I believe the British refer to it.
There's something in jiu-jitsu, the sport people will do, where basically I will just pull you down on top of me between my legs.
Mm-hmm.
They call it pulling guard. And some guy was joking about it. That's a military dude. He's a former Green Beret, but more modern era. And he calls it tactical retreat.
Yeah.
Because, think about it. Like, you're fighting somebody, you don't want to be on bottom. Like, I know jiu-jitsu, and I still, like, with my back and stuff these days, I'm like, I'd rather be on top.
Yeah.
Right? Anything would be easier. Gravity would be it'd be great.
Yeah.
But, yeah, tactical retreat.
Yeah. Going back to the Civil War, we were talking about Forrest. I forget what engagement it was, but, he got encircled one time and, was attacking one direction. They told him that the Union was attacking in the rear. He said, well, attack both ways then,
Yeah.
So, and they got out of it,
Yeah. Whew. Man. Military history is so fascinating. I had a military historian on recently. One of these guys just got his PhD.
Right.
And he wrote his dissertation about some unit that's from New Hampshire that served in St. Augustine. I can't tell you a ton about it. I got to upload the podcast. We just did it. But it's like one of those things like, man, I got to go research into this more. Right? But it was, he made some interesting points about, like, basically the diversity of interactions in St. Augustine during the Civil War between Union soldiers and civilians, former slaves, just different, like this, like how diverse of a region it was, and how certain soldiers treated different people. I need to get more into what he's done, see if I can't read his actual dissertation.
Sure.
So,
right. Yeah.
But this is one girl I went to grad school with. It's her husband, and she's still getting her PhD. She's been on a few times, and he just graduated. So yeah, and I bring him up because his whole bag is like military history.
Right.
Right. I was like, well, we should talk about the Mongols or the Comanche or something. Let's plan some other episodes.
Right.
So we're going to do some sort of military history discussions on down the road.
Nice.
So we were geeking out on it at the end once we realized we could have more talks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, dude, we can go ahead and wrap it up, man. Dude, it's been as always, no shortage of talking.
I appreciate you having me on.
Well, man, it's nice to not just get a little 10, 15 minute or less snippet of a conversation with you.
Which is, usually in passing in the hallway is how we, so I don't know how informative or entertaining it was, but, I enjoyed it anyway.
Yeah. Hey, man, it's, I have a great audience for what I'm doing in here. I shared a girl that is a local, she used to work at the newspaper, and her episode got 1,000 views. And it's like, wow. She's not, and I'll do like a jiu-jitsu guy that's kind of famous or something. He'll digital zoom in, and I get decent follows, decent views, and the audio. It's a little harder to chart the audio because I have it so many places, but
right.
I get more audio listens than anything else.
Well, and people tend to listen while they're doing something else. Just like your audio books, you can work out and you can listen, so it makes sense that audio traffic would be higher.
Yeah. Well, and audio's, so like Joe
in
Rogan's
the car.
Joe Rogan's podcast just went over to Spotify.
Right.
And you can listen to the audio, but it plays the video simultaneously on Spotify. I didn't even know Spotify had video till that.
Right.
Which they kind of rolled it out simultaneously. But Audible, I mentioned, the audiobook place, starting to do podcasts. So it's an interesting time. But I think, too, it's a strange time because there's some censorship going on. Right?
Yeah.
Like everybody connected to Joe Rogan has been censored. Joe Rogan's been censored on YouTube multiple times. That's why he went to Spotify. Right?
Gotcha.
And he's been getting blasted recently because he talks about Biden's declining mental state. But I'll say on this, I didn't know this, and maybe this is just a cover, but people are saying he's a lifelong stutterer.
You know,
That makes a lot of sense.
yeah, I'm not a fan of censorship at all. We were talking about Gina Carano earlier. I admire her because she says what she says, and you know, she is honest about how she feels about things, and we need more of that.
Yeah.
Without impinging on people's free speech. If you feel something, you should be able to express how you honestly feel about something, regardless of what your opinion is.
Well, in regards to the big thing is now, well, Spotify is its own company or whoever it is, YouTube, and that's why, you know, they don't want you to say it. You can't.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of speculation that amendment will be carried over to social media and that it's not. Cyber law.
Right.
I remember when I was in school, they're like, cyber law is going to be the biggest thing happening in our country. That's going to be new amendments are going to be based off of things we're seeing in the digital age.
Right. Sure.
So,
well, everything constantly evolves, you know, and the world adapts.
yeah.
So, and law, and you know, adapts along with it.
Yep. Even though there's a crazy lag on it most of the time. That's I guess the brooding factions that the founding fathers talked about. If everybody be arguing so much, nobody will take over. It'll be great.
Just be a constant state of argument and flux without dominance.
I think it was Madison that said that. He's like, there'll be so many factions, no one will take over. And I'm just like, that sounds terrible. This is what we're seeing right now.
Yeah. Perpetual chaos and arguing. Yeah.
Well, dude, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Yeah,
I was
thanks
looking
for
forward to this, and I'm sure I've got a few people down at work that listen to this. So Danae from down the hall, she comes in and says she listens to, I heard you say this. What were you saying about that?
Right.
And I'm like, you listen to my podcast? So shout out to Danae if you're listening. I appreciate the support.
Yeah, there you go. Thanks, Danae.
All right. Yeah. Well, right on, man. We'll go ahead and wrap it up, Justin. Appreciate you, dude.
Thanks.